2004 Li Jinsi's True Feelings.
Come at me whenever you're ready.
Li Jinsy said as she unleashed her full cultivation and as much immortal chi as she could muster without going out of control. However, despite her seemingly confident expression, Li Jinsy already knew that she wouldn't be able to defeat Yuan, who could fight on par with God Ascension cultivators. In response, Yuan retrieved number 1 under heaven and activated God of War's astral arts from the get-go.
Here I come.
Yuan warned her before speeding toward her. Li Jinsy raised her sword high and swung with all her might, unleashing a powerful technique that made the very air around them tremble with its force. Yet with a single, effortless motion, Yuan swung his sword, shattering her technique completely, as though it were no more than a breeze before a storm. Li Jinsy gritted her teeth and unleashed one technique after another in rapid succession, each strike fueled by relentless determination. But Yuan didn't even bother to defend. He continued to approach her, allowing every attack to land directly on his body, unflinching, as if her efforts couldn't even reach him.
Damn it!
Li Jinsy roared as she unleashed her strongest technique, Golden Empress Absolute Decree. Suddenly, a golden energy surged around the Golden Empress in Li Jinsy's grasp, radiating a powerful pressure that rippled through the air. Had she unleashed this technique during her spar with the sect elder the day before, there was no doubt she would have claimed victory with ease. However, Li Jinsy didn't stop there and infused the energy with immortal chi and enhanced sword aura. Seeing this, Yuan tightened his grip on his sword, his eyes narrowing as he prepared to meet her strike head-on. In the next moment, Yuan swung his sword, channeling immortal chi through the blade and layering it with enhanced sword aura. A split second later, their swords collided, unleashing a shockwave so powerful it sent ripples through the air and carved fractures into the very fabric of space around them. Li Jinsy had expected to hold her ground for at least a few seconds, but the instant their swords collided, the overwhelming force behind Yuan's strike shattered her balance. Before she could react, her body was hurled through the air, utterly powerless to resist. Li Jinsy coughed up a mouthful of blood, her body trembling as she struggled to rise to her feet. Li Jinsy let out a quiet breath and stopped trying to stand. Instead, she remained on the ground, her gaze drifting upward as she stared into the endless white space, her expression dazed. Seeing this, Yuan withdrew his sword and approached her.
Are you okay?
He asked gently.
No, I'm not.
She replied without hesitation.
No matter how hard I try, no matter how much effort I put in, I still can't seem to catch up to you. Why are you so hung up on catching up? It's not like I will leave you behind or anything.
Yuan said.
In fact, you're soaring when compared to the others.
She glared at him and said.
How else am I supposed to get you to accept me? What?
Yuan raised his eyebrows, puzzled by her words.
If it isn't obvious by now, I have regained my memories as Jinsy.
She said.
And with them came everything she carried, such as her experiences, and her feelings for you. I'm well aware of that, but those memories belong to your previous life. So what?
She snapped, her voice trembling with frustration.
Are you saying I should just cast aside everything I felt and experienced back then? Even if that life ended and we've been reborn, we're still the same soul, still the same people.
She took a breath, her eyes locked onto his.
What about Meishio and Chu Liuxiang? You accepted them in this life. So why can't you accept me?
Yuan let out a quiet sigh and said.
While it's true that my feelings for them have strengthened after regaining my memories, I've known and loved them long before my memories returned. Their feelings for me, they were already there, even before they began recalling anything from their past lives.
He paused for a moment, his gaze steady as he continued.
But you.
He stopped there, not because he didn't want to continue, but because he couldn't. Yuan didn't know Li Jinsy's feelings well enough to say more. When they had first met, she had seemed like nothing more than a battle fanatic. Their relationship had never felt like anything deeper than companionship, similar to how he viewed the other members of the Demon Sealing faction, though perhaps just slightly more. If Li Jinsy's feelings for him had only awakened after regaining Jinshy's memories, then to Yuan, it felt less like love born naturally, and more like something inherited, even forced, and he wasn't sure how to respond to it. Li Jinsy quickly understood what he was trying to say.
So you think I only feel this way because of my past life?
She asked, her voice tight with emotion. She clenched her fists before shouting.
That's not true. I've had these feelings for you long before my memories as Jinshy returned. I've never been good with words, or expressing my feelings.
Her voice softened, and her face flushed with redness as she continued.
Yes, Jinshy's memories helped me understand my emotions better, and they strengthened what I already felt, but don't think for a second that I didn't already love you before then.
Jinsy's mind drifted back to their first encounter on the stage at the Jaded Garden. At the time, she hadn't recognized it for what it was, but she eventually realized that she had started falling for him in the middle of that very battle, and that feeling would only continue to grow as they continued to spar and spend more time with each other. Unfortunately, fighting was the only thing she excelled at. To others, it may have seemed like she viewed Yuan as nothing more than a rival, someone to challenge and chase. But in truth, it had always been more than that, and she just never knew how to show it. Unfortunately, fighting was the 2005, a new addition to the family. After listening to Jinsy's confession, Yuan smiled and said,
I'm flattered you feel that way about me, but I wasn't doubting your feelings.
He continued,
After all, even though I have reincarnated many times, the feelings my incarnations experienced and their emotions are still mine, but not everyone will think like me. I just wanted to make sure that was what you really wanted. I am certain that's what I want.
She responded with a serious face.
I see. So.
Jinsy sat up and stared at him intently, clearly waiting for his response. Yuan extended his hands toward her and smiled.
I was unable to answer Jinshy's feelings because I lacked the courage before, and I lost her before I could. This time, however, I will not make the same mistake.
Jinsy gently took his hand, her voice barely above a whisper.
Does that mean?
Before she could finish, Yuan pulled her to her feet and straight into his arms. Without a word, he leaned in and pressed a soft, tender kiss to her lips. Jinsy's eyes widened with surprise, but she quickly closed her eyes to enjoy the moment. Ah, so this is what it feels like to be finally accepted. Jinsy had spent thousands of years chasing after Tian Xen, only to meet a lonely, unfulfilled end, so one could only imagine the fulfillment Jinsy, who had her experience and emotions, was feeling at this moment.
Let's go back to my place.
Jinsy said afterward. She wanted to embrace him on the spot, but she was afraid that someone else might enter the training ground and witness it. Yuan nodded, and the two of them left the training ground the next moment. Once they arrived at her living quarters, Jinsy brought Yuan directly to the bedroom, where she immediately removed her robes, revealing her defined and flawlessly toned body.
What do you think?
She asked, her face flushed with redness.
It's beautiful.
Yuan smiled before kissing her all over her body. Once Yuan was finished, Jinsy swapped roles and began licking all of his body. Many moments later, Yuan inserted his sword into her scabbard, connecting their bodies together. The room soon echoed with Jinsy's blissful cries, a sound so pure and unrestrained, unlike anything she had ever made before. Time slipped by unnoticed as they lost themselves in waves of pleasure, the outside world forgotten. Before they realized it, days had passed. Though it was her first experience, Jinsy's monstrous endurance allowed her to cultivate with him for days without rest.
It's a pity that my first experience is through my avatar.
Jinsy sighed.
Does it really matter? It feels no different from your real body.
Yuan commented.
No, there is a difference.
Yuan couldn't refute her words. Once a cultivator reached a certain level, the subtle flaws in an avatar became apparent. Though it might feel identical to a real body at first, there were nuanced differences. After all, no matter how powerful a formation might be, it was impossible to perfectly replicate one's physical body using only the soul.
What are you going to do now?
Jinsy asked him.
I'll continue to stay here until I have a solid plan. I see. By the way.
Jinsy paused, a hint of nervousness creeping into her voice.
Which of us is going to tell Meishio and Liuxiang about this?
Caught up in the moment, she had completely forgotten that Yuan already had two official partners. And now, she had crossed that line with him without ever speaking to them first. Yuan smiled and said,
We can do it together. Do you think they'll be angry?
She asked.
It's not impossible, but it's unlikely, since they're just like you.
Jinsy felt slightly better and silently nodded, but she wasn't completely relieved. Sometime later, Yuan and Jinsy met up with Meishio and Chu Liuxiang.
This might be sudden, but I've decided to accept Jinsy into the family.
Yuan said, getting straight to the point without hesitation. Chu Liuxiang and Meishio didn't respond immediately. Instead, they turned to face each other and exchanged silent glances their expressions unreadable.
Sorry, I know I should have come to you two first for permission, but I...
Just as Li Jinsy opened her mouth to speak, Chu Liuxiang smiled and said,
Why do you need our permission? It's not like we own him. If he accepted you, then that's that.
Mei Xiu nodded and added,
We have long accepted the fact that he'll add more people into the family. Honestly, I'm a little surprised it took this long.
Chu Liuxiang chuckled and continued,
Right? I was expecting you to join the family long ago.
Li Jinsy was speechless. She never thought they'd be so calm and accepting. However, now that she thought about it, the two of them wouldn't have been able to coexist with each other if they couldn't accept Yuan having multiple partners.
Anyway, welcome to the family, Jinsy.
Mei Xiu said.
Thank you.
Li Jinsy didn't know what else to say.
So, who else do you plan on adding to the family?
Chu Liuxiang turned to look at Yuan. He responded with a weird smile.
Don't make it sound like I have a list of potential partners. I don't have anything planned. Considering how many lives you've lived, I wouldn't be surprised if we have a few more additions to the family soon.
She chuckled. After chatting for a while, Li Jinsy and Chu Liuxiang eventually returned to their own living quarters, leaving Yuan to spend the week with Mei Xiu. The following week, he devoted his time to Chu Liuxiang, and then to Li Jinsy the week after. In the blink of an eye, 2 months had passed, and it was once again time to visit Yu and the others at the Myriad of Techniques. However, upon their arrival, an unexpected figure appeared.
Yuan? You're back.
It was none other than Senior Bai, 2006 Faceless Sword Emperor.
It's been a while, Senior Bai.
Yuan greeted him with a warm smile.
Indeed, it has been a while. Last I heard from you, you were still in the 6th heaven. Where are you right now?
Senior Bai asked.
I'm currently in the 7th heaven, and I've been staying at Kellen's sect for the last several months.
He said.
What?
Senior Bai frowned after hearing this.
You've been at Kellen's place for several months already? How come I didn't hear anything about this from him? Oh, he went into seclusion shortly after I showed up.
Senior Bai rubbed his eyes and sighed.
That meathead, he should have at least notified me about your return before he went into seclusion.
Yuan chuckled before asking.
How have you been? Same as usual, but I've been spending more time at my sect.
He said.
Your sect, that would be the gates of heaven, correct?
Yuan recalled participating in a trial that required him to fight a disciple from this sect.
Yes, that's correct. Whenever you have the time, you should visit. There's one within the 7th heaven, as well. As well? There's more than one gates of heaven?
Chu Liuxiang asked. Senior Bai nodded and explained.
I have 3 sects, one in the 5th heaven, the 7th heaven, and the 9th heaven. Of course, they all share the same name and are essentially the same sect. What is the purpose of having 3 sects?
Bai Lianhua asked out of curiosity.
It's quite pointless to have multiple sects if you place them all in the same realm. However, if you spread them apart, you'll be able to gain many more disciples. Also, it gives those in the lower heavens another method of ascending. I see.
Bai Lianhua muttered, as she'd been contemplating branching out her faction recently. Senior Bai turned to look at Yuan and continued.
The next Sword Emperor qualifications will be happening soon, and it'll take place within the gates of heaven. You use the sword, right? You might learn a thing or two if you go. Sword Emperor qualifications? What is that?
Li Jinsy asked, her curiosity piqued. Senior Bai then explained.
In the world of sword masters, the highest attainable title is the Sword Emperor, much like how blacksmiths have the title God of Creation, and alchemists have the God of Alchemy. The Sword Emperor is, in essence, the God of Swords. However, there can be multiple Sword Emperors. The Sword Emperor qualification is exactly what it sounds like, an event where sword masters compete for the chance to earn the title of Sword Emperor. Sword Emperor.
Yuan muttered. Li Jinsy glanced over at Yuan. In Jinshy's memories, Tian Xin also acquired the title of Sword Emperor. In fact, he was the strongest Sword Emperor in history.
How does one join this event?
Yuan suddenly asked. Senior Bai smiled and said.
Are you looking to join? Unfortunately, even with your talents, it'd be impossible for you to join in your current state. Only those who have achieved Supreme Sword Aura may join, after all. Supreme Sword Aura, huh? Indeed, I can't use that right now. However, if I have enough time.
Yuan showed a confident smile.
When is the event happening? It's going to happen in 7 years. 7 years?
Yuan raised his eyebrows.
I thought you said it'd be soon. That's quite far away. 7 years is nothing for immortals like me. I guess that's true. Anyway, 7 years should be more than enough for me to master Supreme Sword Aura.
Yuan said casually. Senior Bai stared at him, utterly dumbfounded. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. Most cultivators spent their entire lives unable to even grasp Enhanced Sword Aura, let alone Supreme Sword Aura. And the participants in the Sword Emperor qualification, nearly all of them would be God Ascension realm experts who had lived for tens of thousands of years.
Well, if you're truly serious about mastering Supreme Sword Aura,
Senior Bai said thoughtfully,
then you should visit the Holy Sword Temple. It's a unique place that exists beyond the bounds of the 9 heavens, and nearly every Sword Emperor throughout history has gone there to learn their Supreme Sword Aura. In fact, the strongest Sword Emperor in history, the Faceless Sword Emperor, also trained there. Faceless Sword Emperor.
Yuan raised his eyebrows at this title. Senior Bai mistook Yuan's reaction as intrigue and explained.
The Faceless Sword Emperor earned his title because he always wore a mask and almost nobody knew his true identity. He had other titles such as the Undefeated Sword Emperor and the Mystical Sword Emperor. He's one of the most revered figures in the world of swordmasters.
Jinsy couldn't help but smile after hearing this. The Faceless Sword Emperor was, without doubt, Tian Xin. Senior Bai continued.
No one knows where the Faceless Sword Emperor came from, only that from the very beginning of his recorded history, he lived as an undefeated prodigy. However, just as mysterious as his rise was his disappearance. After attaining the title of Sword Emperor, he vanished without a trace, almost as if he had never existed at all.
He lifted his head to look at the clear blue sky and sighed.
To tell you the truth, I've encountered him once. However, he was just passing by, and I was only a snooty little brat back then. Though I was a mortal, I could tell how formidable he was at a glance. He was a true monster, one that might rival even you, Yuan.
Yuan smiled and said,
All right, I've decided. I'll visit the Holy Sword Temple next.
Of course, it wasn't solely because he wanted to participate in the Sword Emperor qualifications. If he wanted to fight and kill God Ascension realm cultivators, he needed to learn Supreme Sword Aura eventually.
I should have mentioned this first, but not just anyone can enter the Holy Sword Temple. You'll need a referral and then pass a test before you can train there.
Senior Bai suddenly said. 2007, the Great One's appearance.
Referral? From whom?
Yuan asked.
Only sword emperors and reputable sword masters are allowed to give out referrals. Fortunately, we have someone in the faction who can give you a referral. I'll contact them after this. Okay. What about the test? Oh, it's quite simple. Your enhanced sword aura just needs to be powerful enough to damage the sword wall at the Holy Sword Temple. I see. Should be doable. By the way, what is your cultivation at right?
Senior Bai stopped his sentence midway when Yuan exuded some of his cultivation, as he'd been suppressing it.
Peak of Immortal Ascension?
Senior Bai almost couldn't believe his eyes. The last time they met, Yuan was still in the spirit realm. His cultivation increased by an entire major realm in less than a decade. At this rate, he'll become an immortal by our next meeting.
Is my cultivation not enough?
Yuan asked.
No, there shouldn't be any problems as long as you can use enhanced sword aura.
Yuan nodded.
Then there's no problem.
He showed off his enhanced sword aura, which had reached its maximum mastery long ago.
Even in the 9th heaven, only a handful of prodigies have ever managed to attain enhanced sword aura before reaching the immortal realm.
Senior Bai said, swallowing nervously.
But none of them could hold a candle to your level. That's only natural.
Chu Liuxiang remarked in a prideful tone, acting like she was the one being praised.
By the way, about what happened at the Dragon Spiral Mountain.
Senior Bai suddenly brought up the topic, his tone more serious now. It was an incident witnessed by the celestial overlords, after all.
Are you okay? Do you know why the Heavens Mandate and the Celestial Emperor showed up, even causing such a major scene?
Though Yuan trusted Senior Bai deeply enough to entrust his life to him, he chose not to reveal everything. He didn't want to drag him into such a dangerous matter, especially with the celestial overlord situation.
I don't know why, but I think the Celestial Emperor doesn't want me in the 9 heavens.
He said while shaking his head. Senior Bai became silent. He was aware of the Celestial Emperor's curse, and while he never figured out why the Celestial Emperor would target Yuan, he knew there was something between them.
If you ever find yourself in a situation that you cannot handle alone, don't hesitate to rely on us, on the Celestial Overlords. Regardless of your rank, you're still one of us, so as long as you didn't commit any crimes, we'll back you with our full power.
Senior Bai could tell that Yuan wasn't revealing everything, but he didn't press. He trusted Yuan, and believed that, when the time was right, he would share the truth on his own terms. Yuan offered a grateful smile, and said,
I'll keep that in mind. Thank you. Anyway, I won't intrude on your time any longer. I'll leave now to speak with that individual who will give you a referral.
With that, Senior Bai left shortly after.
Looks like you'll be busy again soon, brother.
Yuan sighed.
Senior Bai didn't mention how long it'll take for him to get that referral, so I might still have some time left to spend with you.
He said, not wanting to waste any time. They began chatting with each other, talking about their recent experiences and future plans. Eventually, everyone but Yuan and Yuan left. The siblings spent the next week with each other like their last meeting.
If I don't show up for the next meeting, that means I have already left. Don't worry, I'll be okay, even if I'll be a little lonely.
Yuan said softly as she embraced him.
Now that you've regained your body, the thing I worried about most is finally behind us.
Meanwhile, after he left, Senior Bai reported to Jetchi about Yuan's return and Kellen's blunder.
I see, so he's regained his true body and traveled to the 9 heavens with it.
Jetchi muttered to herself after hearing the report, a sense of relief washing over her.
By the way, did you ask him about what happened at the Dragon Spiral Mountain?
She suddenly asked.
Yes, but he didn't say much. However, he's definitely hiding something, though.
Suzikaki-sai.
It's fine. He probably doesn't want to cause us any trouble. My father was also like that. He'd always try to solve everything on his own. Now then, about the Holy Sword Temple. I'll contact that person myself.
She continued. Senior Bai smiled and said.
That's relieving to hear. I don't want to deal with that eccentric person. I know.
She calmly remarked. Sometime later, after finishing her current work, Jetchi left to find this eccentric person to give Yuan the referral. Meanwhile, at the Azure Dragon clan, just as peace had become the norm, an unfathomable presence suddenly descended out of nowhere, blanketing their entire territory in a suffocating pressure. Upon sensing the overwhelming presence, everyone in the city froze in terror. Not a single soul dared to move, let alone glance around in search of the source, as immense fear gripped their hearts. Zhao Zhanhai and the others immediately stopped their cultivation and rushed out of their residences, moving toward the source of the presence, which was rapidly closing in on them. However, despite the audacity with which this individual had unleashed their presence across the Azure Dragon clan's territory, not a single member felt offended, nor did they approach with anger. Instead, they felt a deep sense of humility, as if standing in the presence of something far beyond themselves. Moments later, Zhao Zhanhai and the other clan members came face to face with the individual. He stood half-naked, his upper torso exposed, revealing a physique so flawless it was as though heaven itself had craved it. His long, golden hair flowed behind him with unnatural grace, swaying gently as if caught in a soft breeze, even though they were all submerged in water.
The Azure Dragon clan humbly greets the Great One.
Zhao Zhanhai and the others called out in unison, their heads lowered in deep submission and reverence, their voices echoing with solemn respect.